want to tell you the full story of what happened to our Hummer. We purchased our Hummer while living in South Florida, knowing that we were going to move to Colorado.
We wanted a 4x4 that we could use in the mountains, that was great in the snow, that we could camp out of, that has good towing ability.
Good morning, guys. So we woke up to this. We heard it coming down on top of the tent.
So after a lot of research, we purchased this 2008 Hummer H3 Alpha Adventure Package with the big old V8. We were really impressed with its ride quality. And honestly, it just looks cool. And you know, we also like the fact that it's not a Jeep or Toyota. Those are great 4x4s, but this is just more unique.
We used our H3 for years as our camping and overlanding rig. We camped in the mountains in all kinds of conditions. Snow and crazy cold temps.
We camped at the beach in Texas and it was amazing.
We camped in the desert surrounded by some of the most stunning landscape imaginable. An unforgettable night next to an arch. In all kinds of canyons. Above Lake Powell and on its sandy shoreline. And next to all kinds of cliffs and cutouts. As Jeff's job became more demanding and his hours away from home increased, we made a plan and set a goal.
I really didn't like my dad being gone so much.
So that required a lot of work. The plan was for me to quit my job and be with Natalie and Bailey full-time and start a business together. And speaking of that, if you haven't yet, go over to Facebook and give 3If by Land a follow. We are so close to getting that to the first level of monetization. That would be a huge help. And also, if you haven't subscribed to 3If by Land on YouTube yet, do us that favor too. It doesn't cost you a penny, and it helps us so much.
So we set a date. We thought about getting a newer 4x4 that would kind of expand our travel capabilities, but during that time, the world was on lockdown, and the prices of vehicles had just gone through the roof, if you could even get one.
So we decided to do a few mods to our H3 to make it function better for us.
We wanted better towing capability, so we added the 6-speed transmission and some more power under the hood. Our H3 really struggled pulling our trailer up steep mountain passes and in long stretches of headwind like in Kansas.
The build was supposed to take 2 months, and then we would sell our house and hit the road.
We purchased a 6L80 6-speed bolt-on transmission kit and decided to install a supercharger to give us some added horsepower.
The supercharger took over 5 months to install along with some other engine mods.
So we started off behind schedule.
The transmission kit was anything but bolt-on, and we lost a year and blew our transmission budget out of the water as a result.
Once the transmission disaster was figured out, we got towed to a shop that specializes in LS engines for a tune.
After that tune, our H3 ran horrible and hot.
So we got towed to another shop for a better tune.
In fact, over the course of 3 years, we towed our H3 way more miles than it was driven. Way more.
The transmission upgrade had 2 major problems. The output shaft was trimmed down and re-splined to fit the stock H3 transfer case. This repurposed output shaft was trimmed so thin that it couldn't hold up to being put in gear, let alone support the 750 horsepower that the transmission was built to handle. The second issue was the adapter used to bolt the transmission to the engine. This piece was made from a half stock H3 adapter and half of a 6L80 adapter. Those two halves were welded together like two pieces of bread to make a sandwich. This was at best a Mickey Mouse adapter that no transmission shop or fabrication shop had any confidence in. The holes didn't even match up properly. At this point, we were wishing we had gone with the 6.2 liter LS engine, like the one in the 2009 H2 and many other vehicles. The 6.2 liter engine matches up very well with the 6-speed transmission that we really wanted. But by now, we're in way too deep to turn back. So we took off the stock transfer case and installed the Behemoth billet aluminum one, and changed both drive shafts and got it all working. Once the transmission was working, we got to drive our H3 for the first time in a year and a half. But we noticed that both the engine and transmission were running hot. To counteract the hot transmission, we put a transmission cooler under the back of the H3 with 2 E fans on it, and we also added a passive inline transmission cooler to help cool things as well. So at a year and a half into our build, the engine was running hot. We thought it was a result of a bad tune, so we had to address that before we could start traveling. We definitely had a bad tune, but that was just the beginning of our problems. Over the course of the next year and a half, we got a lot of advice from some well-intended people. We got advice on ways to get this engine running cooler.
We got advice on lots of things to check out.
So many of you tried to help, and we really appreciate all of your willingness to try to help us figure out all of the problems. We were very overwhelmed with all of your generosity. People from all over the country offered to look at the Hummer to help us figure out the problem.
In addition to all the help that was being offered, there was a handful of people that used this as an advantage to take cheap shots at us and to tell us all the things that we were doing wrong. Without ever looking at our Hummer and probably having little to no experience as diagnostic mechanics.
We get it, we put our story out there, but there's just some people that can't resist kicking you when you're down.
The local engine builders we were working with in Colorado weren't much help with the heat problems. They kept telling us that LS engines run hot. They repeatedly told us that LS engines will run at 220, even 240 degrees in stressful conditions, but they never took the time to just diagnose what was going on here. They just kept telling us that we were being too heat sensitive.
Over time, we learned that diagnosing engine problems is not a job for everyone. It really must be done by someone that has knowledge and desire to check everything and not be satisfied until the problem is identified. We were in desperate need for an OCD diagnostic mechanic.
Over the next year and a half, we tried everything to get our Hummer H3 running cooler.
We went through several radiators.
We moved the radiator forward to make room for the mechanical fan while removing the electric fans.
We installed the heavy-duty fan clutch and a stock fan blade.
We had a shroud custom built for our radiator.
We took the intercooler from the front of the radiator and moved it down below so it wouldn't block airflow to the radiator.
We also tried moving the intercooler to the back where the transmission cooler is.
With the intercooler in its new position, we put electric fans on it.
We changed the thermostat 3 times.
We changed the radiator cap twice.
We drained and vacuum filled the cooling system twice.
We added 2 pusher fans and installed hood vents.
We added shielding and ducting to direct all available air through our radiator.
Most of these changes that we made helped lower our coolant temps, at least for a little while. As we did those cooling system changes, we typically test drove our H3 for a few days. We would see coolant temps start off lower and then begin to creep up as we would drive the H3 more. So we would go back for another round of cooling system mods, test those mods, have cooler temps for a few days, and then see temps start to rise again. We did this over and over again with the same result: cooler for a little while and then starting to run hotter.
We finally got to the point that we decided we needed a new truck. But Jeff came up with one last idea: taking the supercharger off. This would be our last attempt. After that, there would be nothing else to do.
So with the supercharger off and the pusher fans mounted to the front of the radiator on a switch, we set off to meet friends in southern Colorado and spend a few weeks living and traveling on the Colorado backcountry discovery route. This is a trip we had been planning for over 6 months. The hot temperatures around Four Corners were really tough to manage, but we made it through to higher altitude and cooler temperatures. While on the BDR, we learned that our rear locker was not wired up to work. We also learned that our front drive system needed repairs. Our transfer case would no longer shift, so low gears were no longer an option. These things caused us to end our trail time after only a few days. A 4x4 that is rear-wheel drive only isn't much good for pulling a trailer on trails. This turned out to be a good thing. Shortly after, we started discovering more things that had gone wrong with our H3. We found a long list of wiring problems affecting our engine battery charging, our lithium battery charging, our solar system, our dash gauge, our S-Pod, our freezer, and all of our auxiliary lights. We also started running hotter. We got to the point that we could not get stuck at a red light or in traffic. Our pusher fans couldn't keep up. On the highway we ran warmer than we should have been, but at least it was manageable. But the heat was going up a little bit more each day. It kept getting worse every day. We limped our way to Branson, Missouri. We called around looking for a good LS engine shop, and several people recommended Bat Boys. So we called them up and they were able to squeeze us in to diagnose our heat issues. So it turns out our heat problems were not in our imagination. We weren't being overly heat sensitive, and we had a major problem going on in this H3 that was going to destroy the engine if we kept driving it.
At this point, we realized it wasn't the supercharger causing our heating issues, because it was sitting in a box in Colorado. All of the different intercooler mounting locations, radiator changes, different fans, and so on were not treating the problem. They were only treating the symptom.
Our tech at Bat Boys, Paul, took the time to diagnose our engine, something that should have been done by the engine builders in Colorado years ago.
Paul checked everything, and he was the first to come back with something that actually wasn't just a guess.
Paul concluded that we have a head or head gasket problem. He saw coolant pressure rise drastically after just running the engine for a couple minutes. The cooling system was being force-fed combustion gases around the heads and creating way too much pressure for it to run properly, thus making it impossible to cool our engine.
We were unable to get the work done in Branson because there were no shops available to tune the engine once the repairs were done.
The closest shop that tunes LS engines is in Little Rock, Arkansas, and they were booked up for over a month. One positive to take here is that the cooling system fluids were not making it into the engine's oil. That could have made things much worse.
So, with the information from Paul, we towed our H3 to Miami to get further diagnosis on our problem.
Once we arrived in Miami, we started working with an LS engine specialist for a full diagnosis. As it turns out, we have several issues at play. The head gasket install was flawed. The head bolts are not strong enough to hold the heads in place. And thirdly, the factory heads are really not adequate for a supercharger on our engine. We would be much better off with billet heads. These factors were creating a snowball effect. It was a problem that was getting worse the more we drove.
So the problem we were chasing were head gaskets that were failing at an increasing rate.
We would do the cooling system mods and it would run cool for a few days. And then the gaskets would fail a little more, increasing the heat issue. Then we would do a few more mods and pull the temps down a little bit, but as we would drive, we would worsen the head gasket issue. So for the last year and a half, we were chasing a problem blindly and at best temporarily treating the symptoms. As it turns out, a mechanic in Branson, Missouri outsmarted the LS engine building experts in Colorado.
Paul, we cannot thank you enough for taking the time to find out what is really wrong with our Hummer H3.
So, what's next for our H3?
Well, we aren't really sure, but for now, Jeff's mom's going to let us store it here at her house.
In fact, a lot of you guys from Florida, Missouri, Utah, Idaho, a couple other states have offered to store this for us while we get it all sorted out. We don't have to do that, but thank you guys for being so generous.
We have a local shop here in Miami that can do all the engine work.
And when we are in town, Jeff and I will work on the wiring problems and trying to get the transfer case working again. But all that is going to take a lot of time, and we probably won't make a lot of progress until next year.
We really want to stop pouring money into it for a while.
We're looking forward to getting our H3 back into tip-top condition as it moves into a different role for our family. Since the supercharger is off, we're going to leave it off and sell it. We're going to take our H3 in a different direction. If you're in the market for a Magnuson supercharger for a Hummer H3, Colorado, or Canyon, or any other similar vehicle, I think this one's pretty flexible, reach out to us. We will be selling it, and it's not going to make your engine run hot.
Meanwhile, we need to get a new rig and get it ready for us to live out of.
We will see you all next week as our story continues Florida style.